All right. So our keynote for today is Kim Drumgo. Kim is the Chief DEI Officer at Geisinger Health System. In Kim's role, Kim provides strategic leadership, support, and DEI programs across the health system. Her focus areas include inclusive cultures, talent attraction and growth, community health equity, and supplier diversity. With over 25 years of experience, Ms. Drumgo is recognized as a thought leader and demonstrated experience leading change initiatives in large matrix organizations such as Anthem, AICPA, no clue what that is, and Blue Cross Blue Shield. Next page. In the last 15 years, Drumgo has established multiple integral DEI offices and revitalized a Fortune 300 DEI program to align the accountability of DEI with its 70,000 employees strategically. As an expert in the field of diversity management, Drumgo has been cited and featured in Becker's Hospital Review, Chief Healthcare Executives Profiles, and Diversity Journal, Diversity Network Journal, Diversity Manager, the Journal for Accountancy, that's a word, okay, and many other publications and conferences. Drumgo is the past chairman of the Ph.D. Project Board and member of the Conference Board Diversity Council. Yep, Conference Board Diversity Council. She serves as the advisor to many other entities focused on diversity and inclusion. Welcome, Kim. I'm like, where is Kim?
I'm right here. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Dan. And Ahmad, thank you so much. Chamber, thank you for having me. I really appreciate being here, and it's an honor, really, to have a conversation with you about DE&I. I hope you're not experiencing DE&I fatigue for all the conversations you've had today. And that's why I'm going to put a different twist on what I'm going to talk to you about today, and it's more around the lessons that I've learned as a Chief Diversity Officer. And so I'm looking forward to taking you through a journey that I've had and some of those lessons. But I do want to acknowledge a lot of what we have seen in diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, accessibility over the last couple of years, right? And so COVID-19 in early 2020 highlighted the fact that people of color, particularly Black, Latino, communities were impacted with COVID and deaths around COVID disproportionately than any other population. And then we had the murder of George Floyd, and we saw organizations throughout the globe step up and talk about how important diversity, equity, and inclusion was. There was an all-time high of Chief Diversity Officer roles that were open, and that companies were trying to fill those positions. Billions of dollars were dedicated to efforts around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and commitments, 5-year commitments that were made. Unfortunately, just in the recent months, we are seeing the decline of diversity, equity, and inclusion leaders. In fact, we are seeing those roles being eliminated. And 2025 is about 2 years away. I wonder how much we'll be talking about those commitments that organizations made. And so when we think about DE&I, it is a topic that has its ebbs and flows. It has its ups and its downs. Okay, there it is. Once an event happens in our communities, we see this influx of importance and this influx of people getting behind the issue, but then something else takes front stage and we lose that steam. And so what I'll do today is talk to you a little bit about how we can not lose some of that steam, how we can maintain consistency, establish sustainability in our diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. And so I'll talk to you about 5 different points. I'm going to go through 5 of them fairly quickly, because I do want to hear from you. I do want you to ask questions. I want to hear what some of your pain points are so that I can offer some of my advice to you. So just as a matter of a quick introduction, I Oh, wow. Began my career a long time ago. I'm just going to say that. I have a 27-year-old, and I didn't have him when I was 12. So that just gives you an indication of, I celebrated my 50th birthday sometime, a couple of years ago. But I started this role after being an IT leader for, 10 years? So I led HIPAA code sets and transactions at Blue Cross and Blue Shield in North Carolina. And it was during that time that I want to talk to you about one of the first points that I have. It was during that time that our leaders said, Kim, we really need a diversity office. And that's how I got into this profession. So I went from IT into diversity, and it was a very, very difficult decision. But I had the help of my family to help me walk me through that process. So I'm not gonna get into that story. I talk about that a little bit later, but I do want to talk about the first point that I want all of us to remember. It is that increasing diversity by itself does not create inclusion, right? You probably heard that already today. Did y'all hear that already today? So just by increasing the numbers, the magic will not happen. We really have to focus on inclusion as well. And, we hear the business statistics or the business cases for diversity, right? So, companies who have ethnicity and gender diversity outperform the others, right? When you have board diversity, you're more profitable. I think we can all talk about those statistics that we hear about diversity, equity, and inclusion. But what we forget about is that those numbers are numbers. We need to focus on the cultures and the cultures of inclusion in addition to those numbers. So as I mentioned, I was the director of IT at Blue Cross and Blue Shield. And during that time, I had our HR leader and one of the managers come to me and say, Kim, we have an issue. And I said, okay. So in an effort to increase our diversity across the organization, we hired a IT firm with developers, and the developers are from India, right? So the developers come to Blue Cross, and we're asking them to work in our environment, just expecting for everything to happen naturally and magically, right? When they came to me, they said, we're having an issue with the leadership among the team. And so we had one of the individuals from India who was leading the team of diverse programmers. It just so happens that the person leading was from a different caste system in India. And in India, those different caste systems cannot or don't want to be led by someone from another caste system. So here we were in the US, dealing with a caste system issue that we had no knowledge of, none whatsoever. And so, not being in diversity yet, I looked at the HR leader and the manager and said, wow, that's really interesting. It's 5 o'clock. Let's pick this up tomorrow, right? So I go home, and I know my neighbor and good friend is from Ethiopia. Closest person I knew to that side of the world. Not to mention that Ethiopia and India are thousands of miles apart, separated by the Arabian Sea, right? So that she's the only person I knew. So I said, Tegist, I'm dealing with this issue. Apparently there's a caste system. I don't know about the caste system. Can you help me figure out how to do this? She was like, Kim, I'm from Ethiopia. I'm not from India. But long story short, we had to figure it out. We had to figure out what the cultural dynamic in that particular team and in that organization. And so what it taught to us is that we can bring in all the diversity that we need, but we're not going to see the benefits of that diversity until we create a culture of inclusion, right? And I call it the seed in the soil analogy. So the seed in the soil analogy is that we can bring in all of the diversity across the globe and say, hey, we did it. We have a diverse organization. But if we don't prepare the soil, which is the culture, then we will never reap the benefits of what those business cases talk about. So we'll never have the opportunity to see the benefits of people of color and women creating more innovation in our organization, because we'll be dealing with the dysfunction of not creating that culture for people to succeed. So that's my first point. It is to increasing diversity by itself does not create inclusion, but what it does do is it creates a mess for your chief diversity officer. So please, let's make sure we're focused on culture, right? But what gets in the way of creating that inclusive culture? It's the trap of speed. I call it avoiding the trap of high expectations and low patience, right? We, as diversity leaders, get pressed to meet those numbers, to increase the diversity in our organization, and our leaders want it done now. And actually, when I joined Geisinger, just between you and me, they wanted it done 2 days before my start date, because I was getting the calls to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so what we have to do as diversity leaders is slow it down, right? We have to make sure that we maintain a level of consistency, that we are creating that culture, we're cultivating that soil, and educating people on what it means to have an inclusive culture. And part of doing that is making sure that we are exercising the muscles of inclusion. And my process at Geisinger has been to focus on the inside out. And many of you may have heard me say this when I was younger. My grandmother always used to say, Kimberly, make sure you clean your house before you invite people into it, right? I literally thought she was talking about cleaning the house, right? And she was kind of talking about making sure your room is clean before your friends come over. No, what she was talking about is making sure that from the inside out, my soul, my personality, who I am, is stable before I begin getting in relationships with other people. And that's what I think that organizations need to do. They need to create this culture of inclusion and making sure that everyone in our organization understands the importance of what we're doing by learning and by behaving before we start bringing that diversity into our organization. It goes back to the whole seed in the soil. And so our strategy starts with culture and talent. It expands then to community, supplier diversity, and health equity. But it's a slow walk, is what I have to tell our leaders. It's a slow walk, it's a simmer. It's not a pressure cooker. And if any of you love to cook, you will know what I'm talking about when I say it's not a pressure cooker, because pressure cookers are for expedience. I use pressure cookers to throw chicken in, pressure cook it for 10 to 15 minutes. I open it up and everything's falling off the bone, nice and tender, exactly where I want to have it. I don't want my culture like that. I want my culture to have a nice simmer, right? And so our goal is to make sure that we're introducing concepts to our organization at a pace that they're ready to have it and ready to accept it. And many different cultures are different. When I was with Blue Cross, they were ready, right? They were ready to hire, and then when I said slow down, we need to think about how we're going to educate ourselves about the different cultures we're bringing in, they were ready, hungry to do it. When I went to the AICPA, they were slow. They were very slow to grab onto some of those concepts, and we had to spend time talking about it. And I'm doing the same thing at Geisinger, spending time really understanding the culture and making sure that folks have an opportunity to rest and settle into some of these concepts. And so my process is really that I start with communication and awareness, right? So my team has done a fabulous job in making sure that we have awareness months, religious education, inclusive language, some of what I heard in the session before here. We're really focused on making sure we're building that solid foundation. And many people may believe that this is performative, right? These are all performative activities. You're not really digging in, Kim, to really understand, to really help people, drive inclusion in their business processes or in their decision making. Maybe so, but what I am doing is building a muscle I'm building a muscle so that people get used to seeing the information, right? So now, when we miss a holiday, or when we miss a commemorative month, or when we miss something, people will raise their hands. They're like, I noticed. They notice now. And so that's where we're creating that awareness, right? So after awareness, I'll now begin to create programs, right? So now people saw the communication. Now they want to go to the program. They want to learn more. They want to go to the programs. They want to interact with people. We're broadening perspectives. We all have different lived experiences, and we're introducing those lived experiences to our culture. So now they want to see the program. Then we do the policy, right? Then you get more buy-in. So when we simmer, when we do that slow walk, we get more of a buy-in than when we slam a program in and fail, quite honestly, at the program, and we lose confidence and we lose participation, right? So my second point here is to avoid the, high volume, avoid the high expectations and low patience. A really good diversity leader is going to help the organization move at their pace and maybe a little bit faster than they're willing to move, but we're not going to outpace them, right? So that's item number 2. Item number 3 is more focused on measurements. How many of you have difficulty measuring your diversity initiatives? Yes, right? So the measurement that we're always used to showing is our overall workforce and our leadership by gender and ethnicity. Sound familiar? And you can go to anybody's website and see those metrics. What I'm offering you is that those metrics are only the tip of the iceberg, or I should say the duck on top of the pond, right? So those measures are lagging measures. They show where you are in a point in time. They do not show behavior over time. And so what I'm offering you to do is to look below the iceberg. And we all know the iceberg analogy. What you see at the top is only a little bit, and then under the water is, a larger piece of the story. And that's what I believe diversity metrics are. The story happens underneath the iceberg, below the surface. Let me give you an example. So I worked for an organization, and when you looked at our diversity metrics, we were doing way better than our competitors. We had more women in leadership in executive level roles. We had people of color at executive level roles, veterans, people with disabilities. You could look at our senior leadership team, and they reflected the entire organization, the entire community that we served, and we were outpacing our competitors, right? But then I said, but something's still not right. I'm still hearing sentiments from people in the organization that they're not happy. And then, I just saw someone leave, but we replaced them right away, right? So I wanted to look deeper into those metrics. And so I asked to see employee engagement survey results. So I looked at the employee engagement survey results, and I was seeing a trend of women of color were not happy. So they weren't happy with their pay, they weren't happy with leadership decisions, and they weren't happy that the organization was doing what they needed to do from a DE&I perspective. I was like, something's happening there. So that was my first clue. Then I went to my HR leaders and I said, can I look at your turnover rates? Can I also look at net hire ratios? And what I found in the net hire ratios is that our hiring of women and people of color were just off the charts. Had no problem bringing women, people of color into our organizations. We were also bringing in really good people with disability numbers. But then when I looked at the turnover rate, it outpaced. It was disproportionate to anybody else in the organization. And that's where I knew I needed to work. So our goal then was on retention. So while our numbers looked good, underneath the surface, we had a revolving door that was happening. Just as quickly as we were bringing people in, we were losing them. As soon as their Period of time for retention bonus was up, they were out, and we had an issue. And so we had to implement programs not to recruit, because we were doing a good job there. We were focused on retention. Our problem was retaining those individuals. Our recruiters were doing a great job going to HBCUs, HSIs. We had a great track record from a recruiting standpoint, but we were struggling as it relates to retention, right? So, we have to pay attention to the metrics. When measuring our metrics, we've got to look below the iceberg, okay? The next item that I want to talk about is really focused on allies. And we all consider ourselves allies. We all know what allyship is, right? It's when we take our own privilege, our own position, and advocate for someone who's different than us. Advocating for someone, having a voice for someone who doesn't have a voice, right? Being at the table for someone else when they're not at the table. And most often, the definition of an advocate is that you're not an advocate until the other person, or you're not an ally until the other person recognizes you as the ally. But I would argue that for me, I began to be an ally, I think the first time that I met my brother, who was 3 years older than I was, right? My best friend in the entire world. But there was something different about my brother Jay. When I was 3 and he was 6, he liked my clothes. He wanted to go to ballet with me. But my family wouldn't have it. They would never have it. So he had to hide who he was. Whenever I would go to the mall and try on clothes, Jay was in tow with me because he would always make sure that I looked good, which I love. It's the beauty of having a gay brother. But he could never do what I was doing. So he vicariously lived through me. In all of my life, all of his life, I was his ally. When kids on the playground would tease him, I was in my pink dress that he helped to pick out, and my pigtails on top of them. I was a little girl in the cute dress, ready to fight, ready to go for my brother. He was my best friend. When adults would pick on him and tease him, I was quick to say something. Very, very quick. And so allies invest themselves, they take risks, and they really stand up for the people that they're fighting for. And so I became an ally early in my life. And I demonstrated that. My kids saw how I stuck up for my brother. And then they began to do it for themselves, right? So I mentioned I have a 27-year-old. He's a daredevil. He grew up, when he was 5, he came to me and said, "Mom, I want to play hockey." And so I said, "Okay, you're going to play hockey. You can play hockey. You'll probably be the only brown kid on the ice, but I will let you play hockey." So he continued to play hockey. He was really, really good, actually, And fast forward to when he was about 14 years old, we are in a hockey game. And I always, when he got older, I began to get a little worried. I'm like, well, he's not in basketball or football. He loves the sport where he's the only one. And it worried me because I just knew one day the N-word would come out in a hockey game. I just knew it was going to happen. But this day I didn't expect it to happen, and I didn't expect what would happen after it happened. And so on this day, I'm watching the game, and I'm half looking because I'm trying to put my scarves on and everything. If you've ever been to hockey games, it's cold. And when your children play hockey, you're always cold. And so I'm fumbling with my clothes, trying to get my clothes on, or my scarf and things. And I look up, and I see a fight. It's a brawl, which is not unusual for hockey, right? But I did notice that Corey was nowhere everybody was fighting, and he's off skating to the side, right? And so after the hockey game, we get in the car, and I said, what happened? He was like, you really want to know? I was like, I do want to know. And he said, one of the other team members called me the N-word. His teammates went to work on the other team, right? So in my mind, I'm thinking, wow, these kids are showing up as an ally for my son. They're 14 years old, and they're showing up as an ally for my kid. There's nothing I wouldn't do for Patrick Williams, who was probably the leader of that. I know he was. And so it's really important that as we are allies as adults, we teach our children how to be allies. And I think that's the most important thing that we can do as diversity leaders, is modeling behavior and teaching our kids to do the same thing. So I'm going to finish this one last point with my, at the time, 5-year-old. So I have a 27-year-old now, I have an 18-year-old, and I have a 16-year-old. And so this story is when my youngest, Caden, he was in kindergarten. And Kayla, his sister, was probably in the 3rd grade. Kayla is my butterfly. She's my social butterfly. She loves to dress. She's cute. She does all the, pretty girls. I heard the pretty girls thing from TikTok. She taught me the pretty girls TikTok and all of that. She's amazing. Caden, very quiet, very shy. He loves sports, but he's generally a very quiet kid. So when he was 5 and Kayla was 3rd grade, so that made her 8, 7 and a half, 8, I came to pick them up after school. Kayla was very quiet. She looked like she'd been crying. And Caden just kept looking at her like this. He had his eye on her, would not move. And I'm like, hey guys, it's time to go. And he gets up, he watches her. He's watching her. He never looks at me. He's just watching her as we walk out. Well, when we get outside, he all of a sudden says, that's the girl that hurt my sister, Apparently someone hit Kayla, and Caden wasn't having it. So we're instilling this sense of protection and allyship in making sure that when you see something, you say something, right? And so I think allyship for me is one of the most important lessons that I've learned as a DE&I leader, and one of the most important skills that I like to teach, that I like to ensure that everyone has. The last one is also a tearjerker, or something that's very personal to me. And my last point is, the biases and the isms are killing us. Period. And I say that because I recently held a book club at Geisinger, and it was on a book by author Linda Villarosa, and it's called Under the Skin, the hidden impact of racism across our nation. And in the book, Linda Villarosa very clearly articulates, even in the first page on the first chapter, that Black Americans are dying at a rate faster than any other population. We have a prevalence for disease disproportionate to any other population. And this trend is happening in many other populations as well. And so what she says is that it's not because we're not taking care of ourselves, right? Many people believe that healthcare disparities can be solved by more exercise, healthier food, getting better healthcare, going to the doctor when there's a problem. But what Linda Villarosa says is that that's only part of the problem. The other part of the problem are the isms and the phobias that exist today. And she points to a woman by the name of Arlene Geronimus, who has coined the term weathering, right? So when you think about weathering, remember in elementary school we talked about weathering and how rocks change formations over billions of years because of wind, because of rain, chemicals in the atmosphere. Rocks and settlements begin to shift because of all of the wear and tear that they've experienced over the years. Dr. Geronimus applies that same thing to people. And she believes that systemic racism, systemic phobias, systemic classism, systemic xenophobia, homophobia, all impact our health. All of it impacts our health. So when we think about the amount of suicide that we're seeing today in the LGBTQ population, the Black population, Latino population, in fact, Latino girls between the ages of 12 and 13 have the highest suicide rates. Did you know that? Unbelievable. So those isms are not only impacting our emotions, they're impacting our health, like our genetic makeup in some cases. And so what she says is, and she used the example of Black teen moms and Black educated working moms. What she noticed, Linda Villarosa noticed, is that Black teen moms had lower incidence of low birth rates and maternal complications than Black moms who were educated and successful. Why was that? What she pointed to was weathering. So the older we get, the more incidents of racism, the more incidents of discrimination Black women are exposed to. And so when you're younger, you have less of stress, and your pregnancy is less complicated. When you're older, you have more of those incidents. You're experiencing weathering, and that's really what they're seeing in terms of Black maternal health. Case in point, Serena Williams. Why in the world would Serena Williams have a complicated birth? Bias-isms, right? Phobias, assumptions, prejudice, people not taking her seriously. And that's a lot of what Linda Villarosa found in her book. And so when I say that the isms are killing us, they really are. And it's not just African American Black. It's not just Latino. It's not just Asian. It's not just white. It's not just LGBTQ. It's not just veterans. It's not just people with disabilities. All of those isms and phobias impact all of us. And so I'm going to pause for a second. Those are the 5 points that I had for you today. I do love answering questions. And so I'm just going to pause for a second and see if you have any questions and use the rest of our time to answer any questions that you might have. I can't see you really, but the lights are very bright. Yeah. Any questions? Yes.
Hello, and thank you. I was wondering about when you were speaking about metrics and how we're to measure moving forward. You differentiated between flagging, which is just the, race, gender, things like that, and then I think you said behavior metrics. Okay,
Yeah.
and then you spoke from a business or corporate perspective. I was wondering if you could give recommendations for an educational organization or like a nonprofit, which I know a lot of us are today. Okay, thank you.
Okay, good. So let me explain what I meant by so there are lag measures, and then those behavioral measures are more lead measures. So it's lag and lead, right? Lag measures are those that you have a snapshot of. Those lead measures would be the things that are more around behaviors, right? And so that's a great question. When you think about just community organizations and your metrics, I would recommend a couple of things. So the first one is always to make sure that you're looking at your overall organization, those metrics, and making sure that it's reflective of the communities that you're serving. And then the leadership in your organization needs to be reflective of the people in your organization. But then also take a step back and think about how you're impacting the community, right? And what are those measures? What are you trying to achieve? So this is not a community example, but I'll give you an example of, there's a car companies, and they build seat belts, right? Why then are women 73% more likely to die in a car crash than a man wearing a seatbelt? Have we designed those seatbelts in a way that are conducive for women, right? So it's making sure that you have people making decisions that are reflective of the people that they're going to serve, right? Same thing for firefighting. My son's a firefighter, and I didn't know this. He was like, Mom, did you know that female firefighters are more likely to have an accident due to equipment failure than a man? He was like, it's because we built all of this stuff for us. We weren't thinking about y'all. So he's very aware and conscious. So it is thinking about your community and what you're doing for your community to make sure that the decisions that are being made internally are positively impacting those that you serve. Does that help? Okay, great, excellent. Who has the next question? Yes.
Hi, my question was, when you talk about the isms that are killing us, I immediately thought, especially since you work for Geisinger, the medical field, and I wanted to know how you deal with that in Geisinger, because, I mean, I read a report that there's medical training where some doctors, think, especially with POC and black people, that because we're black, we have more pain tolerance. And so how do you deal with that, especially when you have so much high mortality rate with black women?
Yeah, so we talk about it, right? So remember I talked to you early on about our communication and awareness and publishing those reports, publishing those studies. We talk about that. We also have a health equity steering committee that is dedicated to addressing some of those issues. And part of what we're seeing, and I've been in many different healthcare organizations and as a diversity leader in different organizations. And what I always hate to do, but I have to do, is start with training. I have to create a baseline understanding so that people are aware that when we continue this conversation, we're all talking from the same sheet of music. So cultural competency is so very important. So the education is a critical area. Now, I also talked about the communication and awareness, then we do programs, and then we do policy, right? So we're slowly moving out of, because we've established a baseline for communication and awareness and education. We've rolled out tons of education on cultural competency and general diversity education. Now we're moving into programs where we're focused on the patients. What type of programs can we put into place? Then we will begin to lay that over with policy, right? Really what I'm trying to do is to get people to see. You can force people to do the right thing, but it's sustainable and it lasts a lot longer when they see the value in what they're doing. So the programs are intended to create that value. There are many different measures and metrics that are out there related to just what you said. The pain tolerance is a lot higher for black women, or even when you take there's some equipment that doesn't account for the melatonin in skin that may give a different reading, and I forget what it's called right now, but we have a lot of that in our healthcare system. So we have to eradicate all of those by implementing programs and putting in policies to really help us cut down on some of the bias that exists today. Does that make sense? Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yes, next question.
I'm curious how you find it works balancing the DE&I initiatives and the training and the programs you're talking about with the need to fill quotas and make a certain amount of money. You know, my experience in healthcare as a consumer in certain systems has been they have to get a certain number of people through the door, and you may never see the same doctor twice. And my experience as an advocate for youth in foster care is that doesn't work for them. So I'm just curious how in a corporation like Geisinger you're able to balance those two things.
Wow, that's a great question. I don't know if I have a great answer for that, right? So what we try to do with our efforts in diversity, equity, and inclusion is not create something separate, right? So many times you'll hear, okay, we have all of this work to do. Now we have to do diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now we have to do all this training. The magic happens when it's a part of your process. It's integrated into everything that you do. So our goal has been, yes, you do have to do cultural competency training. And yes, you do need to do the diversity training. But we're also going to incorporate it into the existing training that you have, right? So nurse training, physicians training, anytime we're doing training on our EPIC systems, we're incorporating this inclusion piece into those trainings. That helps us, and I'm gonna say hardwire it into our operations versus making it an additional thing that we have to do. I'm not saying that we're there. We have a long way to go, but that methodology will help sustain a lot of the work that we're doing, so that if I were to leave or Regina were to hit the $100 million lottery and take me with her, we would have all of this implemented, and it wouldn't be dependent on us. It would already be ingrained into our everyday process. That's what people say when they say, we want to make this a fabric of what we do. You make it a fabric of what you do by making sure it is the fabric of what you do. It's embedded in your training. It's embedded in your talking points. Anyone else have a question? I see someone easing up on me. That means that we're almost out of time. Are we good? Okay, all right. Okay, good. Okay, good.
So you spoke about being the person that kind of made sure that these initiatives were being seen and have a positive impact. As a student in a college setting, how do you be that person when you express these concerns and it doesn't feel like they're being seen?
Wow. Okay, it's been a long time since I was a student, but I'm going to channel your energy and try to, see where you're coming from to really help answer that question. And so here's the thing. Here's what I don't know if students know, but folks are listening to you, a lot, because you are our future. And even if an administrator or a teacher doesn't visibly show that they're listening to you, they're listening. Believe me. It comes back to a table, it comes back to an office, it's coming back to some boardroom that this is being raised by students. And so I would encourage you, and I know this is going to come back to me, I would encourage you to persist, because our students persist, and I appreciate that, right? Not only do you persist, I always appreciate a solution, and a solution that is not a one and done, but a solution that, what I said earlier, is more sustainable. Right? It's in the fabric of what we're doing. And I hope you all got that message, right? Back to, I think I heard in the previous session, we're hanging up a flag for Pride Month. We're going to put them on all of our campuses. But, July 1st, they all come down. You roll up, they're all down. But the messaging and the behavior and the awareness needs to be embedded into everything that we do. Right? So that's what I hope that your recommendation would have, is how do we embed this into everything that we do and not just focus on 1 month or not a one and done. All right. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it. I appreciate you having me, and I look forward to more conversations. Thank you.
Check, check. All right. Thank you very much, Kim. And it was very nice to finally get to meet you in person.
Exactly.
And we will, the Chamber and DEI Council will be making a donation on your behalf to Ruth's Place, which is our local 24-hour nonprofit women's shelter, overnight women's shelter. So that'll be a donation we made on your behalf. So thank you very much for today. So everyone, thank him again. All right, so that we're almost done for the day. If you need to run, you can go ahead. But no, I want to thank you all for being here as well. This day is to put on, and have all these great speakers, but it means nothing if there's no one here to listen and learn. And so we've all had a great opportunity to learn, and learning from your questions and the things that you brought up, and your feedback will give us great things to plan for next year. So thank you all very much. If you would like to go ahead and get involved, Erica's playing chicken and not coming over here, and so I guess I'll take over her part. Nope, she's not even paying attention. If you would like to get involved in helping to plan events like this and doing other DEI work that the Chamber does, we have a DEI council. I'm your president. I'm your chair. Erica's your vice chair. If you're interested, you can scan the QR code or check out the Chamber's website. It's monthly meetings, usually an hour, but we get to sort of plan and discuss and talk about all of these things on a regular basis. And so putting this together, we'll be looking at ways that we can do some fundraising to help support different DEI efforts around the Valley as well. We have a mentorship program that's through the DEI Council as well. So we're doing a lot of work. You may not see us out and about because DEI is a lot of the work that doesn't always get the press or get to be seen by everyone, but we are doing it, and we would have your input on our council. Even if you don't want to join full time, come for 1 or 2 meetings if there's something that you want to bring up, something to bring to our attention. We would love to have you. So I want to thank you for that. Oh yeah. We also do have a certificate program that you can find out about as well. What we're trying to do is build up sort of a library of resources and things that you can all use with your companies. The certificate program, is that the one you're talking about or the other one? Okay, yeah, sorry, we have a lot of things going on. But no, we're doing one where the more events you attend, there's a way for you to sort of track. Yeah, and holding people accountable, but to track them so that as you're going, you'll receive a certificate from the Chamber saying that you are, in fact, a DEI champion. But it doesn't have to be just events that we're running. These are events that are happening in the Valley as well. You'll find that information on the website also. And so we're working on getting more and more of these things put out there for you all to see, but we do have resources available, but we would also love your input and any help that we can get. So please, if you're interested, go ahead and join us. And then I think I'm handing it back over to the Chamber, who has hosted us and been gracious today, so come on over. Or not? No?
I think that's
You? I just saw the word Chamber. I didn't know who it was going to, so. Are you done live streaming?